Hey guys, hello and welcome to Spudlife with me, your host, Tatty Tim. Okay, so without further ado, let's crack on with this week's episode. So music is my first love, and it'll be my last. Yep, music. Now you know exactly why I'm not a singer and I'm a drummer. Stuck there under the cymbals. Yeah. Music, I absolutely cannot live without music. I've got very peculiar taste, or is the word, what's the word? Eclectic, not peculiar. Yeah, I've got a massive eclectic taste. I'd say my default set is probably rock and metal, but I do adore everything in between. I love creative people, I love creativity, and I love how people just mix things up and make so much different music. So this is something I could talk about for hours and hours and hours, and I probably will. And this is going to be a long episode. I've got a feeling it's going to be quite long. It probably even split into 2 or 3 episodes, knowing me. But yeah, so where did it all begin? I think it initially started was that in the house that I grew up in, music was always on. I mean, granted, it was jazz and it was radio too, but you never know. Nevertheless, it was music. And my first album, believe it or not, that I ever bought or got given, was I given it? I think was Glen Miller, a greatest hits of Glen Miller, and I'm not ashamed to say I used to absolutely love. I knew all of his tunes. I was mildly obsessed with Glen Miller when I was young. Now I was probably between the ages of 8 and 10, perhaps, something like that. But yeah, that introduced me to music and rhythm. And then I got into sort of big band from that sort of stuff. Yeah, stuff like Benny Goodman, Count Basie, Duke Ellington. I always remember of this album by a guy called Joe Loss. He was just a big band conductor of the sort of 70s. He played all of the guys that I've just said, classic songs. And loads of you will have heard a lot of these tunes. You know, it was stuff you could move to, something that had a bit of oomph, a bit of like jazz, and a bit of what's the word I'm looking for? Just a nice bit of drive to it, you know. And you can imagine them dancing to it all back in the dance halls, back in the 40s and the 50s. It must have been absolutely fantastic to have a live band like that and everybody meeting up and, you know, do proper dancing. And that got me into sort of guys like Stan Kenton and the Buddy Rich Big Band. It was like, whoa, so much swing and power with it. It was phenomenal. I'm lucky enough to have seen Buddy Rich live twice, which was unbelievable. Anybody that's a drummer will not fail to put Buddy Rich up there, one of the greatest drummers of all time, undoubtedly, hands down. There's no argument there. It is one of those facts of life. Some would perhaps say Gene Krupa was equally as good, and perhaps he was. I mean, there is a fantastic album with Buddy Rich and Gene Krupa battling it out together, and that was a really good album. 2 slightly different generations battling it out together, but both, man, what a phenomenal set of drummers they both were. So it was around that time then on television, and you got to remember, kids, in those days you only had 3 channels. Yep, BBC One, BBC Two, and ITV. So it must have been on, I think it was on BBC Two one day, and there was the Buddy Rich Big Band with Frank Sinatra. Bloody hell, did that blow me away or what? Frank Sinatra's voice, and it made me a Sinatra fan now for the rest of my life. In fact, one of my funeral songs is a Frank Sinatra song. I bet you can guess which one. So all this was around about, so what was I, about, say I was 10. So it was 1970. So it was 8 to 10. So it was between 76 and 78. So it was around about the same birth time as punk was emerging in the UK. And there was me, a little sort of 8 to 10-year-old, listening to big band jazz and Frank Sinatra and loving it. While down the road, punk was kicking off. So I think it's fair to say at this point that anybody who's listening to this that knows me of old will back me up and say that I've reinvented myself probably more times than David Bowie and Madonna put together. So what you're about to hear is not me making something up. I just like trying different things out, and that's what life's all about, man. You've got to just try things. And the fact that I was lucky enough to be born in an era where so much stuff was going on and so many new things were being invented, and I was part of it, and it was fan-bloody-tastic. I loved every single little phase I went through, every sort of fashion thing I went into. It was fantastic, and I think the sad thing is now that things like that just don't exist anymore. Yep, sorry to break it to you kids, but Generation Xers, we are the best. I mean, come on, at the very least, we invented punk and moshing. You're welcome. So, how did that young, carefree kid that used to go from mega-long cycles humming Glen Miller tunes and big band tunes turn into the long-haired, bearded layabout that you know and love so well? Well, this is an interesting story that we shall delve into right now. It's a bit like Lord of the Rings. It's a bit of an epic. So buckle down, sit back and listen. Like I said, that time, what a mad time it was. I mean, you've got the birth of punk. You've got the end of kind of glam rock. You got the kind of end-ish of sort of hard rock, you know, like your Zeppelins, Sabbaths, Deep Purples, that sort of stuff, Free, all that sort of 70s classic rock. Then you've obviously got the birth of punk. Coming in from that, you've got New Wobbum, and for those of you don't know what New Wobbum is, I haven't just made a boo-boo and spelt something wrong. New Wobbum is the new wave of British heavy metal, so hence the New Wobbum. Following on from that, there was the re-emergence of ska, which obviously hit big time in the 60s, but it re-emerged in the sort of late 70s, early 80s. A lot of it was sort of socially aware sort of music, you know, because there was a lot of shit going on back then, and a lot of unemployment, a lot of sort of degradation, and so a lot of it stemmed from the fact of how people were living, like UB40, 1 in 10, a classic example of that. But yeah, and then obviously the indie label started popping up, and everything kind of was on a massive turn from what it was. You know, back in the day, the record labels ruled. You know, you were in a young band, you wanted to be scouted by the local A&R guy, the A&R guy who worked for the big record company. He would sign you a record deal if you were lucky. You would then be tied to that record company for X amount of albums, blah, 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 and you were tied to them. You made a sort of pittance, as is one of the Sabbath songs, and as well, most of the bands back in the 70s, you know, they were totally ripped off. You know, man, it was ridiculous. It was business. It wasn't a cultural thing for the guys that owned the big record labels back then. It was purely a business. They were just interested in the money. They didn't care about the artists. They didn't care about what they created and the songs and things that they created. All they wanted to see was the dollar signs and the pound signs. But obviously at my age then, I didn't understand any of that. I just enjoyed the music and the songs for what they were. But looking back, you can see that it was such a massive thing that these guys, they were the pioneers of what what's that band? The guys from Leeds. Are they from Leeds or Sheffield? The Arctic Monkeys. I mean, they were one of the first ones to get they came massive just after producing all their own stuff in their bedroom, didn't they? But I mean, that was with the help of the internet. Obviously, back then there was no such thing as an internet. It was like tapes and mates getting into stuff and listening to stuff and adverts in the local music magazines and NME and Music Maker and Melody Maker and all sorts of things like that. So, you know, the guys that started those independent labels back then, they were pioneers, man. They were taking the bull by the horns and sort of sticking it to the man, as they say, and they did it hook, line and sinker. They completely changed the record industry from what it was to what it was again, because it doesn't really exist anymore, does it? I mean, anyone who's in the music industry anymore will tell you that you can't make any money off record sales because record sales are relatively non-existent, you know, and I'm as much to blame as anybody. You'll go onto Spotify, you'll go onto iTunes, and you'll just listen to your favourite songs without even buying it. So hence now I think that's why concert prices and gig tickets are so expensive, and it's just still reliant on that and the merch, because even bands that are massive, they make a pittance off the sort of streaming sites, which is a shame because there's so much still creativity in the world, and all these young bands that are coming through, young singer-songwriters that are so talented, but they haven't really they've got the platform to put it out there, but there's no way now of particularly earning an income from it, so they have to kind of get like a proper job and do their sort of musical thing as a sideline, or be skint forever and do the music as a full-time thing, which is a shame, because, you know, like I say, there's so many creative people out there. It's criminal, really. That's why I still support as much grassroots music as I possibly can. I go to as many sort of local gigs in small venues as possible, just so it keeps that live music scene going, you know, and it means that the band that's performing that night, they might get a little bit of cash from it, they'll get some exposure, and hopefully, potentially, it could lead on to better things for them. There are still bands making it. It's not like it's all doom and gloom. There's never going to be a new band ever again. Of course there will be. There's a lot of really good local bands that are fantastic, that are sort of just edging through, but I think they'll equally back up what I've said, that those days from the 70s when you got a 5-album music deal off I don't know, RCA or somebody like that, they're long gone. It's kind of like, you've got to be something insane, you know, the Sam Smiths of this world and the 1975s, and unfortunately all the poppy stuff, but that's the stuff that makes the money, isn't it? All the stuff that sells. Anything that's a bit maybe avant-garde or a little bit out there, fortunately, you're just going to find that niche, and that's going to be your lot. Saying that, the audience and the fan base that you get will stick with you through thick and thin, and they will be so committed to you, it's insane. Ooh, that's gone a bit deep, isn't it? Let's get off the serious stuff for a minute and get back to how that little 10-year-old morphed into what was my first thing after. I think my first thing after jazz and the old big band stuff, I did sort of flirt with disco a little bit. I mean, come on, man. I was, so what was I, 10 or 11 years old. Top of the Pops was on. All that was on was disco, and maybe a few sort of old glam rocky bands, maybe a bit of T-Rex, or T-Rex died by then, I can't remember. When I say T-Rex, I mean Mark Bolan, obviously, not the band. Yeah, I think David Bowie was going through one of his infamous, or I think, would they be infamous or famous transitions? Was Ziggy Stardust just dying off, and I think he was becoming a little bit more mainstreamy. I think Ziggy Stardust was undoubtedly his finest. I mean, I wasn't really much of a Bowie fan. It wasn't until he kind of died that you realise how good he was, you know, and it was kind of like, whoa, I watched the documentary on Sky Arts, and it was like, man, what an artist he was. He was like just so much ahead of his time, but at the time it wasn't edgy enough for me. Maybe it's because you've always seen it and you become sort of, I think desensitised is the wrong sort of word, but it wasn't shocking enough, you know. Always been for that sort of anti-establishment kind of shock and awe, shock and horror type style of sort of theatre and music, and that's, I think, where the love of metal came into. But that's years ahead yet. We got ages before we hit that little marker. Yeah, so I had this old record player up in my bedroom. It still played 78s. That's how old it was. So it played 45s, 33s, and 78s. Now, anyone that is under 30, you wouldn't have a clue what I'm talking about. But basically, records played at different speeds. So your singles, which were the 7-inch sort of discs, they'd play at 45 RPM. Your standard albums and 12 inches, tell a lie, sometimes the 12 inch would play at 45 as well, and for some reason your albums played at 33. Don't ask me why, it was just one of them things. And then the really, really old music songs, the old vinyl, so some of the Glen Miller that I had was proper old school stuff, and that played on 78, and they were mega thick. Like I mean, I think albums now are so thin, it's insane, but back then albums were kind of a decent thickness, and then 78s were like unbelievably thick. So you got to remember that Radio 2 back in those days wasn't as kind of old school as it is now. Was Radio 1 a thing? I think it perhaps was. Yep, it was. I've just googled it. It was launched in 30th September 1967, so just before I was born. So it was a thing, but however, not in our house. It was Radio 2 throughout, which was alright actually, because it did give me this understanding and sort of knowledge of older songs, which are kind of, you know, a lot of the classics that I still know and love. So anyway, it was also bombarded with a lot of safe songs from the time and a lot of disco. So there was all sorts of stuff. There was like, I Will Survive. What was her name again? Gloria Gaynor. Yep, I Will Survive. And Le Chic. You can't believe I can play the drums, can you? I can't even clap in time. But you know what I'm saying, there was all sorts. Leo Sayer did one, didn't he? I feel like dancing. Yeah. Oh man, I'm gonna have to stop singing because you're just gonna switch off, aren't you? Leo Sayer, I feel like dancing. Everyone jumped on the disco bandwagon, and some of the outfits and the hair, fantastic, iconic 70s, early 80s fashion, unbelievable. One of the best ever. It's got to be Boney M. His hair is amazing. In fact, there's a really good horror thing that I saw not so long ago, and it was the guy. What was it on? I think it's on Netflix. But if you sort of Google Boney M guy in a horror film, it's kind of like that, and it was so funny because he's kind of like this girl sees him, and she's the only one can see him, and he's like, it's awesome. I think he's some sort of demon. She raises some sort of demon, and because she was watching Top of the Pops, because it's set in like the late 70s, because she's watching Top of the Pops, he appears as a demon and in that sort of vision, so it doesn't scare her. So, but it is awesome. Because some of the costumes back then, just put it on YouTube, you lot, and just have a look at. Unless you've lived through it like us, it's kind of, they were ace. I mean, it was like the epitome of flamboyance, wasn't it? It's kind of like everything. So it was like glam rock, and then disco. It was just, what a time to live. And I think the thing I liked about disco, that it made you move, and obviously because I got rhythm, I can move. Yeah, you don't want to see me dance, but I can if I need to. Well, I can move in time to the music. Put it that way. Whether you'd call it dancing or not, it's a matter of opinion, perhaps. But yeah, so obviously because I've got rhythm, I can appreciate and I can move in time to the music. I maybe should video myself making the coleslaw for you lot in the morning, shouldn't I? Maybe I shouldn't. Whatever I'm listening to. Sometimes I'm moving and grooving. Sometimes I'm just banging my head, not against the wall, just the music. So I think on that little visionary note that I've just left in your memories forever, I think it's time perhaps for this week's sponsor to say a word. This week's episode of Spud Life is brought to you by the Alhambra Cinema, Penrith. Located in the heart of Penrith with convenient on-street parking, or in the Bluebell Lane car park opposite, the Alhambra Cinema provides a first-class cinema experience, screening all the latest cinema releases as well as independent and foreign language films in comfortable and relaxing surroundings with Dolby Digital projection and Dolby Digital sound. Wheelchair access is available to all screens, and a large selection of soft and alcoholic beverages are available along with the classic popcorn and chocolate ranges. Also, gift vouchers are available to buy, which can be redeemed for both tickets and confectionery. The Alhambra Cinema Penrith, your local independent cinema, bringing you all the latest releases all of the time. Big thanks, guys, for everybody at the Alhambra team. Fantastic set of guys. Best cinema there is around. Okay, so back to me now, banging my head against the brick wall. Or was I? No, I wasn't. I was just banging my head along in time to the music. So, yeah. So obviously it was getting on a bit now, so what was I coming up to sort of 11, 12, so obviously, you know, an old hat. What we used to have a lot of discos around by us back then. So there's one called Windley Disco and there's one called Streatley Disco. They were kind of like the two local discos, and they used to play a lot of, obviously, the latest sort of hits that were going on at the time, and they were just full of kids our age and then a lot of older teenagers. And it was a good laugh. You know, you'd get dropped off and you'd kind of get picked up later, but in the meantime, so you'd be in there and it'd be like pitch black. Probably a couple of, you know, them 3 light disco things you used to get that you beat in time to the music. So that would be it. There was no sort of laser show or even a disco ball, because it was basically a gymnasium that kind of converted into a disco for a Friday or a Saturday night. I think it was just Friday nights, wasn't it? And And obviously all the boys used to sort of sit around the edge. All the girls would be dancing. There was no alcohol involved. It was kind of like just, we were only that age. So I think you could buy little bottles of pop and crisps and things like that. But I'm guessing a lot of the older teenagers were hammered, because I know when we went back there as older teenagers we were. So, but you didn't really notice that then. You were too sort of embarrassed, because just in case a girl asked you to dance, you'd all be sort of stood at the edge, you know, trying to look mean and moody and cool. Probably just looking like a bunch of dicks. Like all the girls were just doing exactly the same dance, literally, and I swear now, dancing around their handbags. It was a thing. It wasn't something that was like an urban legend. It was a thing. Girls used to dance around their handbags back then. Which I suppose, looking back, makes sense, because, I mean, you're not going to leave it on your chair because someone could have nicked it. So it makes sense you take it out, you'll put them in the middle of them and dance around them, doing that same sort of side-to-side shuffle sort of dance. So, you know what I mean. It's the sort of dance that your mum and dad do now at parties, at Christmas parties, and your nan and granddad do. You know exactly the dance I mean. And then one weekend, rap arrived, and that changed it for everybody. Yeah, you could dance and be cool. Not that I could ever do any sort of body popping. I could just about do. I was too gangly and spindly to do any body popping. I was like a Stretch Armstrong on steroids. You know, I was just gangly and horrible. But there was a few guys that could really do it, and they could do it well. It was kind of like, if you look back, it was kind of like a lot. They used to have these things called challenges. You know, where guys would sort of challenge each other to like a hip hop dance. So the discos then became sort of completely different. You know, the girls still danced around their handbags, but when the hip hop songs came on, it was kind of like, that's when things changed, and the guys got up, and you know, people were round in a circle watching it, and it was really cool, man. It was really good, and it was kind of like the old school rapper. So there was like African Bambaataa and the Sonic Force, and it was Planet Rock, it was called. And then obviously there was the Rapper's Delight by the Sugar Hill Gang as well, which wasn't quite as edgy as the African Bambaataa song was. But there's so many other bands. One of my mates, Martin, he was mega into it. He'd suddenly jumped from rock, metal and rock into like hip hop, big style, completely changed, you know, everything. But he was really good at it. But he was only kind of small, so he could do all the moves. You know, he could do all the pommel horse. Me doing the pommel horse. I don't know if you know what the pommel horse is, don't you? Well, you imagine the gymnasts, what they do on the telly, but without the actual apparatus, and you do it on the floor. God, I was like I better not say for upsetting people, but you can imagine what I looked like. So I think it was due to my lack of dancing ability to hip hop that I never really got into it. I appreciated it, and I really, as I got older and a new lot of generation of sort of rap artists came through, I did get into them. Especially, you've probably seen me wearing me Public Enemy t-shirt around town. So, but yeah, it was kind of like I enjoyed rap and hip hop because it was something new. You know, it was something creative. So there, while I mildly flirted with a bit of hip hop, I really got into sort of punk and the heavier side of things, I think. Mainly because you're kind of influenced by people, aren't you, in your life, whether you like it or not, you are. And there was a couple of my mates, and they had older brothers, so they got us into. They were into sort of like one guy was really into like the 70s kind of rock stuff, so they got me into all that classic 70s rock. And then another mate's brother, he was just getting into punk, and into the Sex Pistols and the Damned, and I used to think he was really cool because he had this massive kind of like furry pink jacket that Captain Sensible would wear, and he had this blonde spiky hair. Imagine like a blonde Sid Vicious. That's what he looked like. To an impressionable pre-teen guy like myself, it was like, whoa, he is so cool, because it was like everyone thought he was cool. Your mums and your dads hated him because he was just not normal. He's not normal, Ian. Look at him, he's not normal. Going around with his hair all spiked up like that. Who does he think he is? He looks like a silly peacock. Look at him. What's them stupid little straps in between the trouser legs? He can hardly walk properly. And look at him stupid shoes he's got on. He's like, flipping heck, give it a rest. It's like he's got some individuality. He's not he's not normal. He was normal, but not in their form of normal. He was being himself. He was expressing himself, it's what people should do. and it was that time, it was that sort of time where you did sort of go out and shock as many people as you could. I mean, any youngsters listening to this now, it must be really difficult for you to understand the sort of shock that punk caused back in then. So for certain guys like myself, it was the best thing since sliced bread, and for other people it was like an abomination. So for me, going around to his house and going to his brother's bedroom and him playing us all the songs and showing us all his latest clothes and his ripped t-shirts and his ripped jeans, and it was like a lot of the stuff that you used to do, you used to have to do it yourself. I mean, I'll get onto that in a couple of minutes' time perhaps, but there wasn't the stuff like there is now. Like you can go into a shop now, if you suddenly want to be a goth or an emo or whatever they're called these days, you can go to a shop and you can buy all the stuff and you can suddenly become one. You can dye your hair black, there's a shitload of clothes you can get, and it's all done for you. But back then it wasn't done. You had to do it yourself, and that was the best part of it. And I think I'll get into that further down the line when we start talking about fashion and everything else, because everything's connected, whether you like it or not. Youth culture, music, fashion, it's all connected. And punk, it wasn't just a form of music, it was an expression of anger for the youth of that time. Obviously I was too young to comprehend what was going on in the world, but looking back you could see how it was perfect for that time. And it wasn't just about the fashion was just that anti-establishment, what's that word, anti-establishment, oh, forget it, but anyway, anti-establishment. So it was the image, the music, the way of life, everything was all interconnected, and that carried through into all forms of youth cultures back then. Everything was interconnected. You were part of a particular tribe, very tribal. And I think it's just sad now that it doesn't really exist anymore. It's such a shame, because you look back at it and it was some of the best times of growing up, and I had some fucking great times growing up, even before all that. And then obviously when you join these little tribes and you've got that connectivity, that same interest in things, it makes it all better still, So it's, like I say, it's such a shame that it doesn't really exist anymore. I'm seeing little snippets of it, like I said a couple of episodes ago, around town. There are a few sort of new little rockers and emos and goths and things, but it's just a shame that the majority of people are all just exactly the same as one another. It's just, oh man, please don't, just be different. Just think outside the box a bit. Don't be afraid of what people think of you. Just be yourself. So I vividly remember one of the first singles that I ever bought, quite possibly the first single actually, and it was Vicious Burger by the Sex Pistols, and it came from, I think it was around about 1979, and it came from their album The Great Rock and Roll Swindle. And I hadn't heard it, but because it was the Sex Pistols, that's all that mattered to me. So it was right, I'm getting it. And it was 99 pence. I'd been given £1. So it was 99p. That's how much singles used to be back then. And it was like, you should have seen the shock and horror on her face when I bought it. This is my adoptive mother that I'm talking about. Now you've got to remember, she made Hyacinth Bouquet look like Harley Quinn. Do you know what I mean? She was just like, keeping up appearances was the ultimate goal of her life. And it was, oh my God, my son has bought the Sex Pistols single. What will the neighbours think? How dare you spend my money on like this rubbish? It's like, Jesus Christ. But anyway, got it home, put it on, couldn't wait to get home and put it on. Well, talk about anticlimax. I don't know what I was expecting, but it was Come On Everybody. So it was basically this old rock and roll song. And as I've got older, I've kind of understood the irony of the Sex Pistols, particularly that album, and it was lost completely on this sort of, how old was I? 79, so I was 11. So this 11-year-old, it was completely lost. I think I was expecting something really outrageous and hard and heavy, and I'd listen to great rock. God Save the Queen and Pretty Vacant and that sort of stuff. So this was, what the fuck? This is shit. Yeah, even at that age, my vocabulary was rather choice. had What You Gonna Do About It on the A side, which was the actual single, and then on the B side it was the God Save the Queen Symphony, which was like God Save the Queen, recorded by the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra or something like that, and which was kind of ironic, I don't know, but you didn't realise that at the time. And then the other song, because there was two songs on the B side, was What You Gonna Do About It, and it was so underwhelming. It's the understatement of the day. I was like, ugh. Yeah, I think the only good thing about it was the shock that it caused to my parents that had bought it, but it was just like, and I think they probably knew then that he's on a downward spiral. There's no saving him. 11 years old, he's buying Sex Pistols records, and there's no saving him. I think it's just one of many times in my life I've been extremely underwhelmed rather than overwhelmed. There's not many overwhelming moments in my life. There's always been underwhelmed. I think it's just my imagination, perhaps, of all my reading and the sort of being by yourself for so long. It kind of like you get lost in your own thoughts, don't you? So, and you just expect a lot because your imagination is so fantastic. Reality sometimes, well, usually all the time, lets you down. So yeah, just another one of the epic underwhelming moments of my life. So what you've got to picture in your mind's eye now is this little scrawny, little tall, gangly 11-year-old kid with a bowl haircut. Literally, it was a bowl haircut. You know, once a week, once a fortnight, a pudding bowl was put on my head, and it was cut round, and I had a bowl haircut. But it was the norm, you know, the same as just having a bath on a Sunday night. We all got in the same bath. You know, you immersionate, it would heat the water up, so you'd have a tank full of water, you'd all have a bath on a Sunday night, and I mean everyone, the whole family, not together obviously. Yeah, as bizarre as my life was, it wasn't that bizarre. So we used to have our bath on Sunday night. What am I talking about baths on Sunday night for? I'm talking about bowler haircuts, aren't I? So I had this bowl haircut, which was kind of like the norm. There was no fancy barbers in them days. You went to your mum's hairdressers, or they did it themselves. And I remember one year she bought one of these DIY. It used to be these shitty things that used to come through the case catalogues, and there was this thing, and it was like cut your hair at home kind of things. It was basically a razor blade, kind of stuffed inside a weird sort of comb type thing, and it was the old idea. And the advert was on telly, and it was like this. You know, you can imagine this proper cheesy 70s advert with the music and everything. Hey, look, this, no more haircuts at the barbers or the hairdressers. Blah, 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 blah. You can have these fantastic salon-style cuts. And they got all these kids with these amazing haircuts that have so obviously been done with proper hairdressers. But they reckon it's just this bizarre razor blade thing that you could use in a fence. You know, it wouldn't look right. It wouldn't look out of place on the set of Peaky Blinders. Do you know what I mean? And she used to try and cut her hair with that, and it just cut chunks out of your hair. I mean, Christ, man, those were the days. So anyway, there was this kid, right, 11, stupid, gangly kid, no fashion sense whatsoever. A lot of people say I haven't lost that skill, but you know, I like what I like, and I don't care what anyone else thinks. So there I was, 11, but getting into punk with this, but not having a clue about the fashion, and having no real sort of way of getting the fashion. Do you know what I mean? Well, even though there was the places in town that you could go to, I was still a little bit on the young side. So I didn't get my free bus pass until I was 13. So back in them days. Now, I can't remember, I might have already mentioned this in one of the other episodes, but I can't remember whether or not every kid in Birmingham got a free bus pass when they were 13, up until they were 16, I think, or 17 when you left school. Or whether it was because your parents were on benefits. I'm not entirely sure how it worked, but I got one regardless. But it was fantastic because you could literally go on any single bus or any train for the whole of the city. So we used to get on the trains, go catch the bus to the train station, and then we just used to hang out in New Street Station for hours on end. Not train spotting, we weren't geeks. We're just dossing. And then you get on the bus, you get on the train, and you go to the other side of town, which was like Longbridge, and that was literally was the other side of town. So we'd got on the train at maybe Erdington, and then we'd get off at Longbridge, have a doss about in Longbridge. There wasn't a lot to do. All there was a massive big car factory there. What did they make there? Was it the Rover? Was it the Rover factory at Longbridge? Can't think what it was. It was some old British car make. Anyway, it don't exist anymore, as most things don't. And so I'm going off piste again, ain't I? So we get back to the punky type things. So even so, the style and the fashion wasn't there. I think the attitude had started to come through. And I think anybody who's got kids will know that most kids at that age, the attitude comes through regardless. And then you couple that with a bit of punk. It's a recipe for disaster, isn't it? Especially when you're living in someone, a Victorian style household where children should be seen and not heard. So it was interesting times, but it was, I enjoyed it. But the amount of times I just go up into my bedroom because I had this record player. Like I say, I'll always praise them for the fact that they would never ever stop my listening to music. I was never told to turn it down. I was never told, I was always encouraged, to read and to enjoy music. And those are the two things that I've carried on throughout the whole of my life. It's arguably two of the greatest things that mankind has ever invented or created. It's music and writing, obviously art as well. But so it's something that it's inevitable that you're going to carry it through for the whole of your life. So like I say, I was enjoying the punk thing. I didn't really kind of get the rock and roll swindle, but I did enjoy Nevermind the Bollocks, and I only enjoyed the kind of heavier sort of stuff. And I think the thing that made a massive change for me was one day, Thursday night, anybody in my age and a bit younger will understand what Thursday nights at 7 o'clock meant. Yep, top of the pops. It was the week thing that you look forward to. It was the time where you'd get half an hour that would be down to you. The dads would be watching it for Pan's People and for, what was the other one? Pan's People and not Hot Gossip, that was the Kenny Everett show, wasn't it? Another thing that dads used to watch. Google it, kids, put up some videos on YouTube and you'll see exactly why the dads used to watch it. What else? What was it? Pan's People and Legs and Co. It was, they were funny as hell. A typical thing for that time. Nowhere in the world could it happen now. But then it was just the norm. So it was basically a load of these women that were scantily clad, dancing around to the latest hits of the time. Because you've got to remember as well, videos weren't a thing then. So I know it's difficult for you to probably comprehend, but not only was there only 3 channels on television, but there was no sort of music videos. There was a handful perhaps, and most of them I'd say were sort of live music videos. MTV didn't exist, so the video sort of boom that was going to happen in a couple of years, it wasn't a thing. So you either got the actual acts live in the studio on Top of the Pops, or you had Legs and Co doing some bizarre dance version of the latest song in the charts, which you look back at it, it's like, you know. And then and the odd video, which is usually a live music thing from, the band's filmed in concert somewhere. And like I say, this one Thursday, my life changed. It just changed forever. And Motorhead were on, and it was the Ace of Spades, and it was just like, whoa, this is it. This is what I've been looking for. I wasn't underwhelmed. This was like, fucking hell, this is fantastic. It was just so fast and furious and gritty. And when something just resonates with you, and it's just like, it just hits you. It's like one of them, and every single person that has listened to this has had a moment where a song has given them goosebumps, haven't you? It's kind of like, the songs, and this was one of those moments. It was like, but obviously as well then, we didn't have a video recorder. I don't think we had one of them for another 4 or 5 years. Did they even exist? I think they did if you were extremely wealthy, but we weren't. So it was just like, you just enjoyed it for what it was. There was no, like Sky Plus now, and you could just rewind it and watch it again, or it didn't happen. It was just, you were living in that moment, and that was it. Once it was gone, it was gone. You just had the memory of it. But it was such a, it's empowering, too strong a word, but such a pivotal moment, you know, in my musical sort of history of liking things. That's a bit of a shit way of putting it, but you know what I'm saying. And it was just pivotal. You know, Top of the Pops was such a eclectic mix. It had probably gone from something like Glory Again or I Will Survive to the Ace of Spades by Motorhead, you know, within a matter of seconds, because that's the sort of show it was. It had everything and anything on it, and it was phenomenal. And I think the only thing you could do if you were into that sort of music, I think you could listen then, was you'd have to listen to the Friday Rock Show, which was on Radio 1 at 10 till midnight on Fridays. So, or you'd listen to the Radio 1 Top 40, which was on a Sunday, and you'd be there taping things. You all done it. We had these bizarre tape recorders, right? So you got a cassette recorder, and you'd be listening to the radio, and she'd have a little transistor radio next to the tape recorder, and you'd be waiting for the song of your liking to come on, and you'd hit record. And the skill of it was that you had to stop pressing record before the DJ started to speak, and then you'd make this master tape of all your favourite songs of the charts of that day. So you'd be listening out for, because you'd see who was in the top 40. You could see that in the local papers, in, you know, the national papers, and it was obviously in all the music papers. So you knew who was where in the charts particularly. So you'd be counting down from 40 to 1, and you'd be there in your bedroom with your little cassette recorder just waiting, click, 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 and then you'd get a little master mixtape for the rest of the week to see you through till either the following Thursday when Top of the Pops was on, and you'd watch something else. And occasionally you would tape something off the telly as well. I mean, the sound was equally as crap as it was when it was on the radio. But, you know, you just made do. Those were the things you did back then. And what a disaster if someone happened to pick your tape up and record over it. God, it was like the end of the world. It was like, so you discovered that if you took the little tabs out of the top of the cassette, no one could record over it. But then obviously you were left with a load of cassettes that just had the same stuff on, and obviously as your music varies, tastes vary, you wanted to record over stuff and you didn't quite like the songs that you did like, so you realised that you could just put a bit of sellotape over those little holes that were in the top of the cassette, and then you'd have a new cassette. You could wipe it all and start again, but only when it was your choice, not when somebody else did it for you. That used to do you fucking nutting. So another kind of pivotal moment, so to speak, was when I saw Blondie on telly as well. It was like, I love her, Blondie. I love you, Debbie Harry. You are for me, and I'm not alone in that respect, am I? I know probably most guys my age that are listening to this, if anybody is listening to it, Debbie Harry would have had a similar effect on you as well. You know, you're a prepubescent, pre-teen kind of boy. Your hormones are just starting to fiddle around with your minds, and then it pops Debbie Harry hanging on the telephone on Top of the Pops. It's like, oh my God. And then Susie Sue pops up. It's like, Jesus Christ, what's going on? So, yeah, Susie Sue and Debbie Harry, you two have got a lot to answer for, girls. Parallel Lines, one of the first albums I ever bought as well, was Parallel Lines. Classic album, kind of new wavy punk sort of stuff coming from New York. So I distinctly remember buying that, and I also had Setting Suns by the Jam. I was a bit of a Jam fan, and another classic, Regatta de Blanc by The Police. I remember getting all three of those albums for Christmas off various people. And I can still remember to this day being upstairs, just listening to those albums on sort of Christmas night, being in my bedroom, eating Quality Streets till I felt sick, and because I got given a box of chocolates and a couple of albums, and I was as happy as a pig and shit. It was just like, I got what I wanted music-wise, and I just played those albums to death, and it was brilliant. And I had all the Quality Streets I could eat, and I used to just pick out all the ones with the brown wrappers, you know, the toffee chocolate ones. Yeah. I still like them, but I tend to find that they pull out my fillings now, which is, you know, as much as I enjoy them, I enjoy having a full set of teeth as well. So, and it's too expensive to keep getting fillings all the time. So, I've kind of knocked quality streets on the head for now until I get some new gnashers. Yeah, so at this point I was still at junior school. So it was kind of, you were 11, coming on 12. So you were in the top year of the junior school. So you thought you were the dog's bollocks, didn't you? You thought, you know, this is it. You were basically a big fish in a little pond, and it was, you know, you ruled. It was fantastic. And I distinctly remember again the school disco when we left school, and it was just the usual classic. I don't think there was even any disco lights. It was just they just turned the lights off and let us do our thing. So, and it was around the same time, so there was obviously Parallel Lines, which was Debbie Harry, so there was all the classic songs off that, and then there was some of the jam stuff that I used to like, and then so there was like Eating Rifles and all that sort of stuff, and there was some real good old-fashioned Rainbow, but Rainbow with Brian, is it Brian Parker? Brian Parker? Who the fuck's Brian Parker? I meant Graham Bonnet. Who's... What the hell? Is he even a singer in a band, or just made him up? But yeah, Brian, I was going to say it again. Graham Bonnet, and it was the classic sort of Rainbow songs from that era. So it was Since You've Been Gone, Since You've Been Gone, Since You've Been Gone, I'm out of my head, can't take it, na 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 na, could I be wrong, na 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 na. And All Night Long, you know, there were two brilliant songs from that time. But then, at the time, you don't listen to the lyrics, don't you? It's just a tune. But then you read the lyrics now, and it's going. I'll just read them to you quickly. So it's like, I want to touch you, I want to feel you, I want to make you mine. I want to love you all night long. I want to be with you all night long. I want to love you all night long. I want to be with you all night long. I saw you standing there by the stage, your black stockings and your see-through dress. Your mouth is open, but I don't want to hear you say goodnight. You're sort of young, but you're over age. It's kind of like, jeez, man. Another song of that era. God. I think it was that, and I really remember these three songs, and there was them two, and I'm pretty sure it was Status Quo rocking all over the world. It was definitely a Status Quo song, and we thought we were so cool, because like you said, you know, we were top of the school, so it was this school disco, we were there, and we were sort of stood with our sort of shoulder width stance, you know, looking like, imagine a Superman sort of pose, and then we had our thumbs hooked into the loops of our jeans, and you'd kind of be going, ducking your shoulders to the front and coming back up and ducking your other shoulder down. I'm kind of doing it as we speak, which is no good for you because you're just listening on headphones. But should I do it as a video? Nah. But you kind of get what I mean. And it was kind of, and you kind of rock back and you do it in two. So you're going 1, 2, back 2, forward 2, 1, 2, back 2. And it was kind of like, and we thought we were so cool at dancing. And it amazed me how some people couldn't get it as well, because obviously being able to play the drums, you just got natural rhythm. If someone hasn't got any rhythm, it's like, how can you not get this? It's the simplest thing in the world to me. But I suppose some people just can't get it. So when people are out of time, and it was kind of like, no, you do like this, and they still couldn't get it. So, yeah, well. So at this point in time, I'd kind of started to grow out the bowl haircut, and I was a little bit more, wasn't particularly a style, more like a grown-out bowl. So I've gone from a pudding basin sort of Friar Tuck style haircut to a slightly longer version with curls. And if anybody's seen me with my hair down, I do have extremely curly hair. Well, not extremely curly, more of a wave, but yeah, I look like I've got a shaggy perm, basically, without having one. Yeah, so this was the summer of 79, 80. So this is when I now transition from junior school into senior school, and my reinvention stages hit overdrive. And I think we'll perhaps save that for episode 2 of the music years. I told you I could speak for hours about music. I don't think I even touched on a lot of it. I mean, there were so many other little things that went on. like I said, there were so many influences, so many styles that were happening, so many styles that were sort of finishing. It was just a fantastic time to live, and especially in the city as well. It's in a city that has spawned so many great musical talents. Obviously, we won't mention Duran Duran, but I'm just kidding. But you know what I'm saying? The Midlands has spawned a massive amount of sort of pop rock superstars over the years. So it was great to sort of be part of that and go to the places that a lot of people went to. Not necessarily mixed with people, but you know, you were there where people have been or did go, and it was. I think we'll get into that further in the next sort of episode about my musical sort of journey. So I think that's it once again for another episode of Spud Life. I'd like to thank you so much for taking the time to listen to me again. It really means a lot to me, and thank you to the Alhambra for again sponsoring the show. If anybody else would like to sponsor the show, please get in touch. Or if you want to put an advert in the show, DM me, come see me in town. We can work something out. Again, to you guys, it means a lot to everybody that listens to the show, and it gives me the incentive to carry on, especially when I get such amazing feedback from yourselves. The amount of messages I'm getting saying how fantastic it is, and they really enjoy it, and it, you know, it resonates with a lot of things with people. It's great. It's, you know, beyond my wildest dreams. I didn't think anyone would really want to sit and listen to me yabbering on about shit, but it turns out you do. So I got plenty of shit to talk about. So we can, and it's something's going to happen in the near future. I'm going away in a couple of weeks, but hopefully when I come back, I might be putting this into audio and video. You could be able to see me talking into the microphone, not just listen to me. Yeah, I'm hoping someone's offered me the chance of coming in and producing the show for me, which is like, whoa, I didn't expect that. So yeah, they've got all the gear, cameras, microphones, mixing desk, the whole caboose, and they've said that they would like to produce the show, which is like, bloody hell. So it might even sound a bit more professional than it does at the moment, without me clunking and banging and knocking my rings all over the place and bracelets. So yeah, watch this space or listen to this space, whatever. Again, thanks guys, and I think from the caravan of love for another week, I shall call it a day. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope I've made some of you smile. Maybe it's resonated with a few things for you. If it has, please contact me, please come and say hello, and I shall see you and speak to you all next week. Thanks guys, take care, love you all, bye. Ladies and gentlemen, Teddy Tim has left the building.